Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Foley Is Pod. And, of course, we couldn't do it without the Hall of Famer and the hardcore legend, Mr. Mick Foley. Mick, how are you, man?
I'm doing great. Sorry about that burp. That's from Zoa.
Coming in hot.
Coming in hot, brother. Love me some Zoa energy drink, but only one per show. Very rarely do I have an energy drink during a regular day, but I think our audience they deserve to see the amped up Foley.
I'm for it.
Yeah.
I want to put a bug in everybody's ear that we recorded last week's episode with me not really knowing what you did or didn't want to talk about with all the WWE news.
Yeah.
And in between episodes, you said, hey, man, are we not going to talk about? So let's talk about it.
I think you have to. I mean, our show is a stroll down memory lane.
It is.
And I have said, hey, a lot of people are offering the same tour.
Yes.
It's just a matter of who you feel comfortable with as your tour guide.
There you go.
And so I'm really very thankful for everyone who chooses to have me take them on this stroll down memory lane. But I think when something is this big, I think we should touch on these things. So
let's talk about it. You know, there's lots of, as you and I are recording this, there's lots of uncertainty in wrestling right now because the news is out. Vince McMahon is coming back to WWE. He had abandoned ship, and now he's coming back. He's ousted 3 board members, made room for himself, George and Michelle, his former leadership group, and they're now back as board members. He plans to be the executive chairman or whatever his title is, and boy, there's lots of nervousness out there.
It's the second shortest retirement in WWE history.
You guys are in a race.
Following only mine, which lasted for 6 weeks. Hey, look. I mean, you probably know Vince very well by extension through your relationship with JR, doing Grilling JR. JR's got probably, and with Bruce, right? Nobody spent as much time over the decades as those two guys. And I know JR had told me years ago that he was worried for Vince in retirement because JR's, it's safe to say JR's a workaholic is there is a negative connotation because you apply so much of yourself to working. But even he's got the Oklahoma football.
He's got stuff.
He has stuff that he loves in his life. And I don't think Vince loves his family unconditionally. Of course. But I'm talking about hobbies.
No.
You know, there's no golfing. There's none of the things you usually associate with men of his age. No scrapbooking for Vince, right? No bird watching. Like, his business was very, very personal. Like, his life revolved and his family revolved around the business. So that was one of my concerns is what is he going to do? What is he going to do? He loves working. I can't imagine him not being, not being there in that gorilla position. It would seem like something was amiss if he wasn't there behind it. With that being said, I think the company's has been in a really good direction. There's a reason why Jerry Lawler and Jerry Jarrett changed up the book every 6 months.
Yes.
Whether it was needed or not, it was a pair of fresh ears and eyes on the product, and they all put their own stamps on it. And I think Hunter has had a chance to do that, and it's a really fun show with a lot of improvements made. I don't know. I wouldn't want to be there. This is family, and now it's become competition. So I don't know. It sounds like it has the possibility of getting ugly. I feel for Vince, and I care very much about Vince as a person. I've had my ups and downs with him over the years. But that's been largely business. You know, always respected him, always genuinely liked him, and I want to make sure that this guy who meant so much to my life is happy.
Yes.
Let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. I was given the Iggy a few months ago that something might be happening, and now it's happening. It's going to be interesting, for sure. But Vince coming around with you're talking about a guy who literally single-handedly stole last year's Mania with the stunner for the ages.
Sorry, Stone Cold.
Sorry, Steve. Steve was surprised that I said that his match was my favorite match of the night, of the weekend. Yes. I thought that Austin and
Kevin Owens tore it up.
It tore it up. It over-delivered in every way imaginable. And it would be really a difficult time of the year. I mean, Vince has got 2 children, but WrestleMania is his 3rd baby, right? It's his. I can't imagine the loneliness, that he must feel not having that company. So it will be really interesting. I want what's best for the company, what's best for the individuals involved, and that might not be, might not be possible for everyone to come out happy.
I think it's going to be possible. I mean, I know that there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of folks who are nervous, but if he has more invested than anyone else, and I don't think it's unrealistic or unreasonable to think that he would want to be involved in media rights talks or sale talks.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people who are saying, hey, this could be a way for him to take the company private or for him to sell it to this company or that company. And I guess he's apparently enlisted the help of J.P. Morgan to at least start the sale talks. It's going to be interesting to see how this shakes out. But I, for one, don't necessarily expect major changes right away. It's just my gut feeling. What say you?
I don't know. I don't know. He's Vince.
Yeah.
It's in his nature to shake things up.
It is.
Right? I mean, it's in his Vince. It may not have been the most efficient way to write a show and to perform a show where a gentleman takes a Sharpie through 6 days of hard work.
Correct.
But I believe that's how Vince feels he works best.
Yes.
Under pressure. That's his way of doing things. I think he loves the idea of shaking things up so that he can thrive. I don't know if that means he would shake things up after the Rumble, before Mania, or wait until afterwards, but it's going to be interesting for sure.
It's amazing to see how the stock market even responded to the news.
How did they respond?
In the 5 days after, it was up 27.78%.
Wow.
So to go up 27% in just a handful of days is remarkable, and we'll see how it shakes out. I, for one, am excited for what the future looks like, and a lot of people have thought WWE was developing a sense of sameness for a while. Well, that feels like that's out the window right now. Yeah. So be careful what you wish for.
I think the only thing that top that is a live shaving demonstration.
Oh, from our pals at Henson Shaving.
Yeah.
We've talked about what a great sponsor they were, and I knew that you were a guy who was handy with a blade, but I didn't know you just carried one around. I
just want people to know I stand by our sponsors.
Yes.
You've heard, I don't know, is it a hassle when you hear that I've shot down the idea for a sponsor?
No.
It's twice, right? Where it's like, not comfortable with that one. Doesn't mean they're a bad product, but not something I feel comfortable with. I do feel comfortable with this. You can see that part of the beard is shaved and part is not. I'm only holding up the phone because it's like my
your mirror.
My mirror, and it's just a dry.
You're doing it dry here, bud. And look there. Precision shaving. I can't believe this is real. If you've ever thought you would see Mick Foley using a blade on YouTube, well, here it is right now.
Look at that.
Listen, I don't want you to get color because it would be bad for our sponsor, but it might be good for views on YouTube.
It might be good for YouTube views. I don't think it's going to have me. This is safe.
How is this? How have you not cut yourself yet?
Well,
You're really good with
I'm
this.
Careful. I respect the apparatus.
The hardware.
The hardware. And I do need to pull down a little bit in order to get to the nooks and crannies there. But you can see I trust in the product. And I think when we trim up after the show, it's going to be it.
You realize in 10 minutes I'm going to have you do a live demonstration for Blue Chew now, right? You've opened up a can of worms here today. Let's speaking of blade men, let's talk about one of our favorites.
Oh, one of the best, brother.
Abdullah the Butcher. Nobody could bleed like this man. He just celebrated a birthday not too many days ago, January 11th, 1941, Windsor, Ontario, Canada. Who would have ever thought Abdullah the Butcher's real name?
Larry Shreve.
Doesn't seem like a Larry.
Doesn't strike me as Larry. He is. I remember getting on board with Abdullah and his plane tickets before September 11th, 2001. His tickets, A. Butcher. A Butcher, sometimes Abdullah Butcher.
I love it.
Yeah. But yeah, one of the great heels and characters in our business. The guy got over everywhere he went. and never got to, accomplish his one goal of wrestling at Madison Square Garden.
That was his goal.
Yeah, that was his goal. And I pitched Abdullah. I think it was for that 98 or the one in the Garden. So that would have been...
Oh, for WrestleMania, you're saying?
For
or Royal Rumble?
Royal Rumble.
Okay.
I pitched him. Where was the 2000? Where was the 98 Rumble?
San Jose.
When was all right? So the 2000. When
2000 was in Madison Square Garden.
I pitched Abdullah, feeling like he would be a draw. I actually showed Vince the Battle Bowl.
Well, hang on. It was you and Triple H there in 2000. What would you have wanted Abdullah to do?
I wanted for him to make that dream come true.
Just be on the show.
That it was the Rumble, that it was the Garden, that Abdullah's active days, were winding down. And we had a chance to not only make this dream come true for Abdullah, but also to have this entity who'd never been in WWE, who could do things beyond, the barbaric, because he could be funny. I teamed up enough with him to know that he could inject a little humor, and the spot I'm going to bring up is Battle Bowl WCW, I think 92, which was at Dusty Rhodes. The idea was you have different WCW superstars or Marcus
drawn
Bagwell.
Out of a raffle.
Yeah. You didn't, no pop? What? WCW superstars and Marcus Bagwell?
Oh, Lord.
Okay. There you go.
I love that works for Miz or Bagwell, and you get it every time. Well, the locker room full of WWE superstars and the Miz. That's fantastic.
So in this case, I was teamed up with Sergeant Buddy Lee Parker.
Yes.
Abdullah can't figure out, storyline-wise, why he's separated from his real partner.
Yes.
And his rationale is, what if I beat the living tar out of Buddy Lee Parker backstage, and then he comes out, and he's got the facial expressions, and he's working the Shakespeare and the pantomime, it's me and you now. He has to be escorted to the back, I can't remember. And then Sergeant Buddy Lee Parker does the slow crawl while I work a match against Ricky Steamboat and Private Todd Champion, 2-on-1, and when Buddy finally makes it back, he gets beaten in rapid fashion. But a great display of fortitude on Buddy's part, but it was also giving Vince the idea of how this guy can make a splash, as much of a splash as someone can make when they have never been in that ring before. But I would say, I thought he would be a genuine attraction for the Rumble at the Garden, where he always wanted to wrestle. I thought it was a win-win situation. He never got to do that, but he was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame.
I'm glad he's in the WWE Hall of Fame. I can't believe this is real, but he turns 82 this month.
82.
He started wrestling when he was just 17 years old in 1958. So when you first meet him in WCW in 1990, he's a 32-year vet, my man.
Mm-hmm.
He had wrestled everyone in those 30-plus years. Gene Kiniski, Stu Hart, Hulk Hogan, Dusty Rhodes, Bruiser Brody. You even wrote in your book, as a freshman in college, I taped a picture of Abdullah to my wall, and by the end of the year, had everyone in Fitzgerald Hall believing that Abdullah the Butcher was my father.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Strange when you consider that Abby was a 400-pound black man whose grooves carved into his head so deep that he could flip out people in casinos by inserting gambling chips into them.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I did. I showed up as a freshman, taped that photo of the wall. I still remember what I had on my wall. I had an American flag. I had a poster of Clint Eastwood from Joe Kidd, a poster of Candace Loving, who was the 25th anniversary Playboy Playmate, in a one piece, not in the nude. And then I had a photo of Abdullah the Butcher, and I just told that same fib for so long it became part of accepted history. Abdullah the Butcher was my father, and I was his adopted son.
Just had to Google Candace Loving, sorry. Yeah, check that out. Be right back. All right, got it.
There you go.
Let's move on. Let's talk about when you first meet Abdullah the Butcher, or when you first see Abdullah the Butcher. What's your first memory, not necessarily of meeting him, but just seeing him? Is it from the magazines back in the day?
Magazines.
Yeah.
At that time, 83, WWE, WWF took over the time slot of what had been Southwest Championship Wrestling on USA. And they started, it was like a news magazine type of thing where you'd see clips of wrestling from other areas. We didn't know at the time that was Vince's way of introducing people to new stars and then grabbing them. I can't tell you for a fact that Abdullah was ever on that show. I think it was mainly the magazines that built him up so much. And then in '85, when I started setting up rings for Tommy D Promotions, Abdullah headlined a weekend against Jimmy Boogie Woogie Man Valiant. So the idea of seeing an all-out bloodbath on an independent show was completely new to me.
Yes.
Like the old idea of fighting all around the building. Tommy D thought it was the best thing he'd ever seen in all his years of promoting. It was surreal to me, for me to see a guy who I had claimed was my adoptive dad in the flesh, like tearing it down in front of 600-700 people and doing it all over again the next night.
It's amazing that Abdullah the Butcher entertained so many people, worked literally everywhere against so many opponents, and as you said, never wrestled at Madison Square Garden, never was the world champion, or really even positioned to be the top guy. He was the special attraction.
He was. He would come into a territory for 3-4 months at a time, help set it on fire, build up a sense of urgency with whatever babyface he was doing battle with. It didn't have to be for a title. It shouldn't have even been for a title.
He wasn't fighting for belts. He's fighting for blood.
Yeah, fighting for blood. And this is one of the things I think is missing from the current product, is the sense that somebody is fighting for their life. That he was that. We see shades of it. But it's a different atmosphere, different time. When he came in, he was the guy among 3 or 4 people unique to the business where you would turn to your friend and go, all right, I know what most of that is, but this is real.
That guy's evil.
This is real. Those other matches, maybe they're not, but him fighting for his life against Tommy Rich and the Omni, he was great with these super over baby faces, and he could sell out arenas without the belt hanging in the balance.
When you say, one of maybe 3 guys, are the other 2 the Sheik and Bruiser Brody, or is there someone?
Yeah, I think that's safe to say. And I think at other times the Mongolian Stomper would go into Calgary and wreak havoc, and he did that all around. But I would say those are the 3 guys. Sheik not as much because he tended to stay in his territory. But Brody and Abdullah went all over the country and all over the world, just creating mayhem.
What was it, do you think, about Abby that the Japanese people gravitated to?
I mean, there was that real life aura of danger because he was one of another handful of people for whom the crowd parted, because if they did not, they would get hurt.
Yes.
Brody, it was with the chain, and Abdullah, people would get cut. Like, they had to get out of the way. It was a different idea where nobody was lining up with a lawyer. They were all kind of willingly playing their role as extras in a horror movie. But there was a genuine sense of fear, even though I think Meltzer would say that the look on people's faces when they were being chased by Brody and Abdullah was different than the faces of the young female fans being chased by Dump Matsumoto, and that it was even a little more real because of the youthful nature of the All Japan women's fans as opposed to the All Japan men's fans. But they knew whether they thought he was 100% evil or not. They knew if they weren't running, they were going to get hit, and that was an accepted fact.
His matches with Terry Funk in Japan are legendary, and I've seen before that Terry even talks about one of the best 3 matches of his career being against Abdullah the Butcher.
Really?
Which is kind of hard to imagine, because when you think about Abdullah the Butcher, you do think of a spectacle more so than a traditional competitive match.
Yeah.
But it just goes to show you, man, the storytelling is where the money is in wrestling.
Yeah, I mean, Abdullah was a guy who would go head-to-head with Abdullah the Butcher. Abdullah was a guy who would go head-to-head with Andre the Giant and have people expect or at least believe that this guy was a credible threat to Andre.
Yeah.
He was a credible threat to everyone.
Absolutely.
Everyone. Even in 1990, when I started working with him, there was an ominous nature to Abdullah the Butcher, like you didn't know. You weren't sure. And it goes back again to, okay, Johnny, I know the rest of that wrestling is whatever it is, but this guy's real. And I wanted a little piece of that for myself, inspired by guys like Abdullah and Brody. And I've said in my live shows, and I probably said here, that I wanted to be a cross between Brody and a Dynamite Kid. The brawling nature of Brody and the Tommy Billington's willingness to use his own body as a weapon. So Bill Goldberg would say, I want to be one part John Matuzak, great Oakland Raiders lineman with a very outgoing personality, and an MMA fighter. And then you sprinkle your own magic onto that, your own seasonings, and you make it your own. So I don't think anyone looked at me when I was, the scarier Cactus Jack, early 90s through mid 90s, and said, he's blatantly ripping off Terry Funk, even though we eventually all do, if you're in that brawling thing. But there are little elements of Brody and Funk and Abdullah the Butcher, although I was never as scary as any of those guys, but because I had that other element of the wildness with the style, I was able to make my own mark as well.
Everyone watching this considers you to be, I shouldn't say everyone, most everyone watching this considers you to be the nicest man in wrestling. And it's so crazy to imagine. But I remember, I was a fan. I was watching that you were this crazed maniac, murderous, evil figure. But in reality, the nicest guy. I mean, for goodness sake, we've spent the better part of the last month just talking about your love of Santa Claus.
Yeah.
That's not the type of character we would expect you to play. But even in this room, there's pictures of you covered in blood and just psycho stuff.
I'm really proud. I'm looking now at the Japanese deathmatch shirt. I was so proud of the fact that when my wife took my two younger boys to Raw, that they were both wearing Foley shirts. And Huey, my youngest, he was wearing the deathmatch shirt.
That's awesome.
I was really proud of that. I had to turn that amplifier up, right? So I know that people aren't interested, by and large, about the Santa stuff, except when it comes to December. But that was a character I was portraying that I put the same amount of love and attention to detail. But whereas Cactus Jack and Mankind especially was darker than Cactus was, but Cactus Jack, I had to become wilder, more aggressive. I'm not aggressive by nature. That was one of my major stumbling blocks, is that I had to find a way to create aggression, because without the aggression, none of the bumps I had lined up would pay off the way they would if I could be a more formidable and vicious heel. So that was always an uphill climb for me. But the same way that I had to create more aggression, more darkness for those characters, when it came to Santa, I had to find a way to become more gentle, more patient, more understanding. So it's on one level, I was never those guys, but they were a part of me, if that makes sense.
Yes.
I don't want to sound like I'm putting too much. Like, if you're a non-wrestling fan, this sounds like a ridiculous.
No, it's effort and detail, attention to detail in the character.
Effort and attention to detail. And back then, when you were still, holding on to kayfabe to the point where I had a girlfriend for 6 months in the world-class territory who never knew my real name.
Yeah.
Never saw me when I wasn't at least partially in character. And this is a lesson I learned from Abdullah, even though it wouldn't come along until 2 years after I left World Class, is that Abdullah would be in character a lot of the time he was in public. So a flight attendant comes by and he's like, and Abdullah started shaking and his eyes were bugging out, and the woman comes over and just, flight attendant scurries off. And he's like, gotta keep the gimmick going, champ, So that at that time you built a gimmick by creating grassroots word of mouth. Believability everywhere you went. And as strange, even when I was writing Have a Nice Day, some of that stuff seemed really outdated. But at the same time, you had to appreciate the lengths that at that time it was largely the men were willing to go to create the believability in those characters.
I just find it fascinating, the dichotomy, for lack of a better word, of trying to balance these two characters as a fan, because we know who you really are now.
Yeah.
And I've often heard, almost as like a tongue-in-cheek thing, people say, well, in wrestling, the bad guys are really good guys, and the good guys are really bad guys. But most of us who are listening to this, we don't know Abdullah the Butcher.
Right.
But we know that the character you portrayed, for lack of a better word, was the villain in a horror movie.
Yeah.
And Abdullah the Butcher, much the same. But we don't really know Larry. Was he a good dude, like the way people talk about the opposite?
Yes, he was. I think there's really something to, because the baby face and heels, everyone does turns. But I think there's something to be said for those men and women who begin as heels and they apply their craft as heels because they don't buy into the adulation. So they don't buy into the idea that here's a guy who's had 3 months of training and now he's signing autographs.
Yes.
And he's selling photos, because back then, if you could pick up an extra $50 to $100 selling photos, you were doubling or tripling your payoff. So even in the Memphis territory, the baby faces did photos, heels did not. Every once in a while, you'd have a baby face who'd come over with a little bit of money and just said, hey, I want to thank you for helping me get over. But that was rare. It was just accepted that being a heel meant there'd be no merchandise money. And I think that you learn to be humble because you didn't buy into being someone who you were not, even though you would later buy into it almost out of necessity, because if you weren't living the gimmick to some extent, you probably weren't doing it right on screen.
Right.
And there's a fine line between putting everything you have into the character and becoming the character. I don't think I ever did, but I'm sure, if you were my girlfriend in 1989, you were getting half Cactus Jack, half Mick Foley, and you didn't know where one began and one ended, or even that Cactus Jack had the name Mick Foley.
So let's talk about 1990. There's a short feud between Sullivan's Slaughterhouse of Kevin Sullivan, yourself, and Bam Bam Bigelow versus Norman the Lunatic, Captain Mike Rotunda, and Abdullah the Butcher. And it all starts when Rotunda defeats the Cuban Assassin in a TV match on WCW at the end of March. You and Sullivan then run out after Captain Mike, and Sullivan tears open a mysterious black box at ringside, and inside the box is Abdullah the Butcher. And he destroys you and Sullivan, throwing you all around ringside, hitting you with any object he can find. Is this your first time meeting him? WCW?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. I wrestled with Joel Goodhart, but that was after leaving. I wrestled against Abdullah for Joel Goodhart's Tri-State Wrestling, but that was after WCW. The cool thing, this is an extension of the feud with Mike Rotunda.
Yes.
So I'm so proud of the fact that I feuded with Bray Wyatt's dad.
That's pretty
right?
Fun.
It's pretty cool. This is that amazing Cornette Sullivan underneath angle where they have me turning on my tag team partners.
Yes.
It gets to a point where I can't find someone to tag with me. Mike Rotundo is asked whether he'd be willing to do it. He does it. I turn on Mike. So now I'm not turning on a Nasty Ned Brady, with all due respect to Nasty Ned, who had some of the greatest facial expressions for any, underneath. I think Ned's willing to, underneath town's not a derogatory way. These are guys who do favors, make us look good.
Yes.
And Ned did a great job doing that, but I'm no longer facing Nasty Ned or turning on Nasty Ned. I'm now turning on, or Lee Scott, don't want to leave Lee Scott out of the equation, but now I'm turning on Captain Mike Rotundo, so we go into a singles feud, which now extends. Sullivan, I become part of Sullivan's Slaughterhouse. Buzz Sawyer breaks his wrist in graphic fashion on live TV on Clash of the Champions. I don't know if Bam Bam was officially part of the Slaughterhouse or whether he and Humperdinck were working in cahoots with me and Kevin. But they did Mike unleashed Abdullah the Butcher. And brother, it's been said numerous times about it's not what you do, it's how you do it.
Yes.
But there's just something about Abdullah the Butcher. Now he's a babyface. The exact same guy he is as a heel, but he's doing it to heels. And when they say we're taking bumps everywhere, I think that mainly means I was taking bumps.
Yes.
But Kevin's putting over his offense in Kevin's own unique way. And we've got a cool little thing going on, a cool, short-term, but fun and explosive little angle going on.
The famous wrestler in a box. We've heard Jim Cornette say it for years. Anybody who comes out of a box is instantly over.
We talked about Terry Funk last week. A year later, I would be coming out of a box to jumpstart, a big push with WCW. And Abdullah the Butcher coming out of the box was pretty special.
It leads to a handful of tag team and six-man tags on TV and the house shows. They're all wild brawls that end in non-finishes. And Abby's out of WCW by the end of April 1990, and you, in fact, are gone by mid-June in 90.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Any memories that stand out during those matches?
Well, it's a tackle, shoulder tackle is such an elementary move in the ring, but when you're doing it on the concrete, people, they hear it, they hear that thud, boom, boom, and there's no way to disguise that. So that was one of the big bumps, even though it was really elementary, just taking night in, night out, house shows and TV, those type of bumps, it made the matches stand out. So as a heel, I love the idea of super selling for somebody like Abdullah the Butcher, who was a babyface in heel's clothing.
You returned to WCW in August of 91. Abby is in almost immediately afterwards. And on the August 24th edition of WCW, they show Sting receiving a large box wrapped up as a gift, supposedly from a fan. Sting opens it, and out pops Abdullah. When are we going to stop opening boxes here at WCW? You wrote in your book, Abdullah the Butcher, my opponent from a year earlier, was another of the wrestlers brought in to quote-unquote feed Sting. With the success of Cactus Jack, the feeding angle was stopped. Dusty decided to team me up with Abdullah the Butcher, and Abby was one of the great monsters in the business. In real life, Abby was a sharp businessman and an even sharper dresser who now owns and operates Abdullah's House of Ribs in Atlanta. He chewed unlit cigars and spoke with a surprisingly high voice and was a man with such class that he once held in a fart
for 300 miles. 300 or more?
200.
200, okay.
As to not offend my wife who was traveling with me.
Yeah. He got out of the car and he was like, champ, I was holding that fart in for 200 miles. That's a classy man.
Was it a big one?
I think it was I believe it was a one cheek sneak.
Oh, it was SBD.
Yes.
Silent but deadly.
But I was just really grateful that he felt that way. And you could tell I was comfortable with Abby because he was on a road trip, with me and my wife, The Abby connection was great because you usually had to have 3 people in order to have the WCW paid for the rental cars.
Oh, wow.
And you couldn't usually get a Cadillac. But because I had Abdullah, who had narcolepsy, would fall asleep on longer drives, like we basically rode by ourselves. For a while we rode with Brian Knighton is his real name, Axel Rotten. We rode with him a little bit, or he rode with us a little bit. But it was basically me and Abby on our own with the caddies, which I haven't rented in a couple decades,
And that was just part of his WCW deal?
Just part of the deal that I was allowed to do that and submit it, and that we were given that little exemption because he was Abdullah the Butcher.
Yeah, a large man.
Yeah.
You mentioned that he's a sharp dresser, has a high-pitched voice, and a classy man. Sharp dresser like Michael Hayes sharp dresser?
No, I mean, I would say his dressing was a little less
over the
top than Michael's. Okay. Whereas Abdullah was just really beautifully tailored, stuff for big men. So Abdullah, he told me I'm a big man. I've got to dress well. I've got to keep clean. And he did. He was, that 200 miles without letting a fart out, that's some classy stuff.
I like it.
Yeah.
I heard it briefly earlier. Do you have a Abdullah the Butcher impression?
Hey, champ. He's going to make it, champ. And I look out the window, and he's pointing to Dallas Page, DDP. And I went, Diamond Dallas Page? Because DDP was floundering, right? He was a guy who breaks in at age 37. I said, why? He goes, lives his gimmick, champ. He lives his gimmick. And Abdullah was able to see that in DDP.
Before anybody did.
Long before anybody did. I thought, well, that's a strange call. And sure enough,
It worked out.
DDP, I'd say, with all his attributes, his belief in himself was probably his primary attribute.
Chewing the unlit cigars. Did you ever see him light one?
I personally did not. I'm not saying he didn't. I don't remember Abdullah. He worked the cigar. He was a great guy to travel with. It's a shame that I've just fallen out of touch with him. I never had a falling out, but I remember him taking me to the place that we've become, Abdullah the Butcher's House of Ribs, for 20 years, right? I don't think it's there anymore.
Right.
20 years or more, and he was showing me it when it was on its ground floor, and it became a really sought-after eatery. House of Ribs and Chinese food.
That's right.
That's right.
I'm curious, when it's just you and Abdullah in the car, what are you playing on the radio? What type of music does Cactus Jack and Abdullah the Butcher listen to?
This is 91. This is pre Dewey was with us, but Dewey was an infant, so I wasn't a year-round Christmas man. We would listen to stuff that was popular. I had a CD collection that Steve Austin would later say made me the guy with the worst road music in the crew. But Abdullah was open to a variety of different things. Sure, yeah.
I just imagine he, like a lot of old wrestlers, liked old country music.
He did like old country music, and he was a dessert guy. And that may have had something to do with Mrs. Foley's little boy going up from 287 to, I was probably legit 280, saying I was 287, then I went way over 300. Partially because I was traveling with Abdullah, and partially because I was putting on that sympathy weight when my wife was pregnant with the first two kids.
So talk to me about Abdullah being a dessert guy. What was Abdullah's go-to? What do you mean?
I don't think it was one singular go-to. It would be the
If
idea.
it's sweet, he's into
do
it.
a little shopping, and he would pick up a pie, pecan, pumpkin, or we're on the road, more likely to order desserts than almost all the guys who were watching their figures.
Yeah.
And I just noticed a direct correlation between how thin I was and how little money I made, and that the more weight I put on, the better I was doing. Like the 220-pound Cactus Jack was sleeping in his car and eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. The 235 Cactus Jack got a full-time job in Memphis. The 260-pound Cactus Jack started getting over in world class, and now I would go on to overdo that theory. But there was a correlation between how good I looked and how well I was used, and I did better looking different, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Like I couldn't do that. I looked better than the fans. I had to look different than the fans.
We've heard a lot of people say things like, business is done in the car. And we've heard people even say, you got to go to Automobile University, that sort of thinking. Were you getting wrestling advice, business advice, life advice? These car rides when you're traveling with Abdullah, you said he was a sharp businessman.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on some of that?
I can. There have been a few times when I've done talks with wrestling students. What do they call it? There's a name they give it.
Seminar.
And I remember thinking, what the heck am I going to be able to talk about? And then as soon as I went out there, you couldn't shut me up. So it was like 2.5 hours where I'm not able to show moves off as much as I am, hopefully impart some wisdom on people. And one thing I tell them, almost the first thing, is one of the biggest challenges you face in this business is the ability to take in information from everywhere and then somehow filter out what does not work for you, while simultaneously holding on to enough of it so that it may come back to help you at a later date.
Yes.
And so when I was traveling with Abdullah, clearly you want to be that monster heel, and you're traveling with one of the great monster heels in the history of the business. So everything he says is a valuable resource for me. But when it comes to like putting people over, leaving territories, over doing jobs, I've got to like nod my head in agreement while also thinking to myself, I don't believe that applies to me in the current age. Like, I believe that if you do your job well enough, that you can lose. Now, I'm a little different because I'm much more of a normal-looking guy as compared to Abdullah. At that point, hair, shoulder length, not everybody and their brother had a goatee, and I was able to portray that sense of wildness to where people weren't sure where the character began and the real person ended and the character began. But I believe that I can do jobs, that I can put people over, and that if I am able to get my stuff in my way, and especially, from a character-driven standpoint, I'm going to be okay. And I had some of the biggest stars in the business tell me, you're losing too often, and I respected their viewpoints, but also thought to myself, this is a new age, and I just believed that I was going to be able to get over while losing, even though I had, you have to chalk up enough wins that you look like a threat. But that was the type of thing that I would listen to, that I would take in, and that I would kind of filter out what I didn't think worked for me.
At Clash of the Champions 16 on September 5th from Augusta, Georgia, Sting is wrestling Johnny B. Bad, and during the match, another large gift box is brought up and placed on the ramp. What are we doing with all these gifts? Eventually, boom, you charge through the box, knock down Bad's manager, Teddy Long. You attack the Stinger. You hit the big flying elbow from the middle turnbuckle. You're jumping over the announcers onto Sting, who's out on the floor. And this is a major moment in your career here, is it not?
It really is. So much so that I realize it's a defining moment when I'm in that box. I'm nervous as hell, and I'm saying the prayer, and I know that this one moment has the ability to change my life. I did not know going into this that I was supposed to be one of 6 or 7 guys to feed. When I say a stagnant Sting, I mean that's the way it was seen, just that the character had hit a plateau, and they were looking to feed him a handful of what we consider monster heels.
Like Hogan a few years before.
Yeah, in rapid succession. Now, Abdullah wasn't going to lose flat out, but Sting coming out on the winning end of a wild brawl by DQ was going to do more for him than, pinning just about anybody. And luckily, I guess based on what we did that night and also the chemistry that Abdullah and I had, changed their opinions so that instead of it being a 6-week run for me, it went on to be a 3-year run. And Abdullah left on his own volition over a loss at the Omni, that they wanted a loss and he didn't want to do it. A lot of credence was played to the importance of the Japanese magazines, where guys not only didn't want to lose, but didn't even want to be seen in a compromising position, which made doing business difficult. But Abdullah was a genuine legend over there. I saw guys walk out who had 1 or 2 tours a year with Japan, and that just sounded that was just, to me, silly that someone would give up the potential of a full-time job to protect a spot that wasn't even that strong to begin with. I'm talking about guys, on the bottom of the card of All or New Japan tours who didn't want to do business for a national touring company like WCW or WWE.
Later in the show, the same Clash of the Champions 16, you write in your book that you were set to give your first live interview, and they're counting you down. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. And Paulie Dangerously,
turns to me,
who's conducting the interview, and he says, "Who would have thought 2 homeboys from New York live on national television?" Yep. And then Paulie hands you the mic for your big live debut. ... I sucked.
Yeah, this is another instance where I think I may have been a little too tough on myself.
You were.
Because I think from a character-driven, first of all, I'm just learning through repetition. Not so much repetition. I'm learning more from visualization and belief in myself. And this was my method. Other people, mirrors and, looking in the mirror and cutting promos, filming themselves, which I think everybody should do, especially because the filming is so easy to do these days. But I had that ability to think of things and to try to bring them to life, and especially had the confidence to do a bunch of different things and to try out different things, which somebody could have warned me was not the safe way to go. I mean, the safe way is to think of one promo and do it over and over on your market-specific promos. But I was getting so much practice on a regular basis, and I believed in myself. But here I know I've got one of the biggest payoffs in my life, that I dropped the elbow of my career, on Sting.
Yes.
Now I see Logan Paul every time there's a WWE commercial doing a much better and more athletic, move than I did. But at that time, 280 pounds coming off the second turnbuckle with the best elbow I've ever dropped. Maybe between that one and the one I dropped on Randy Orton at Backlash 2004. But have a guy of Sting's magnitude selling the hell out of it.
Yes.
Now we've got to pay it off. Now there'll be people who rightfully so said you gave him his comeback on the same show, but that's just the way WCW did it. Vince sometimes didn't even want to leave a show without the babyface making some kind of a showing for himself. But I know Sting's going to come out of that box, and more so. Specific to what we're doing, I believe quality was going to win out.
Yes.
And if I could put something up on the board, have two big wins in one night, it didn't matter to me that Sting had gotten his comeback. I thought people are going to want to see more of this rivalry. And it was one of the great compliments I've ever received in my life, that Sting, who just a few weeks earlier had been told this guy's just here to put you over, is then saying among the nicest words I've ever heard. He just looked at me when we got to the back and he went, "You're great." And I'm getting like these, I'm an emotional guy. And that was, man.
Validation you needed.
Validation, and we were off to the races after that.
So after your promo that you say sucked, you're doing your promo and saying, hey, as they wheel out yet another wrapped refrigerator box, "Oh, this is my business partner and close personal friend, Abdullah the Butcher. I think I'll give Abdullah a big Cactus Jack hug." Boom, it's Sting.
Sting, right?
That's the comeback. It's a big deal.
This is the hip toss off the ramp. It's
on the cold, hard concrete.
Cold, hard.
At 287 pounds.
Yeah.
You were right. This was a brutal move, and especially shocking in a time period when the cold, hard concrete gimmick was mine, all mine. Try taking a piece of raw liver out of your refrigerator and place it on your kitchen counter. Good. Now push it off the table and listen to it hit the kitchen floor. Good. Did you hear that sound? That was my 287 pounds and what it sounded like when it hit the cold, hard concrete. But did I stay down? As Steve Austin would say, oh, hell no. I got up and hit Stinger with a garbage can, emptied the contents. It's amazing what you pulled off here. It's a visual that we as wrestling fans had not seen a lot of. It was a level of violence, a level of realism. You sort of talked about it earlier where you would hear guys talk about other characters in wrestling say, okay, I know that match was whatever, but this. And the thing about this is this really was real. You really were landing on concrete.
Yeah.
Arn Anderson said, I know one thing. If I threw someone off the ram like that and he got up, I'd run. So WCW is going to take you off the road, but you're still cutting promos on TV with Abby. And you're doing the talking and him looking like a monster. Dusty, you even wrote in your book, Dusty loved Bang Bang and encouraged me to use it in every promo. It was his idea to throw a birthday party for Sting, which turned out to be one of my favorite segments of the year. Do you want to take us through what that was?
Yeah. I mean, this is what Paul E. would call laugh and cut them off. So, and he gives me the line that to me makes this promo, because it's two monster heels having a birthday celebration, and I'm saying happy birthday while Abdullah is eating a cake, without benefit of utensils. And it's Jim Ross giving the promo, but I've got this line where I'm going to cut them off. So it's Cactus. Now, over the years, Cactus Jack and Mankind have kind of become one and the same, where Mankind takes on some of those attributes that Cactus had. So it sounds like a little bit like 96 Mankind, but it's basically me as Cactus Jack going, happy birthday to you, bang, bang. Happy birthday to you, bang, bang. Happy birthday, dear Stinger. Happy birthday to you. Bang, bang. And then JR says, that's nice, but it's not Sting's birthday. And here's the moment. Boom. Don't you think I know that? But I wasn't here for Sting's last birthday. So it's important that we celebrate Sting's last birthday now, because Sting's last birthday was Sting's last birthday. Bang, bang. And why it was such a triumph to me is that 30 seconds earlier, we're eating a birthday cake and singing a birthday song.
Yes.
And now we've struck fear into the hearts of the little Stingers. Like,
yes.
He's essentially saying Sting's going to die.
It's a horror movie.
It's a creative way of saying this guy's not going to be around long enough. And in a PG atmosphere, we're about as threatening as you can be. But I thought it was just really a gratifying time where you're seeing that a lot of the emotional investment you've put into your own character is paying off in a live setting, because you tape live to tape. And sometimes you come out after a match, you got the adrenaline flowing, and they're giving the interviews. I don't remember if we had a match or if that was when we came out and did the promo, but it was really gratifying to me to do those type of things where there was a little sense of humor to it, because I wanted people to feel for that character and then take it away from him, that I never thought, I was never, ever interested in being a heel who did things for money. To me, that was the lazy man's way out. I turned because somebody offered me money. What do you have for me next week? I like the idea that here was an unbalanced man with maybe the most unbalanced monster of them all, and they enjoy hurting you.
Yes.
That was what we were trying to get across.
Yes.
We like doing this.
Yes.
And to me, that bat's been taken out of the hand of almost every, current day wrestler, because especially in WWE, Mr. McMahon decided there should be a pinfall attempt after every major move. But there's nothing ominous or scary about a guy trying to win a match. That's a noble ambition. To fight, struggle to be the best is a noble ambition. Putting someone on their back for 3 seconds is not admirable. Putting somebody on a hospital gurney is. And I think we've lost a little bit of that. Times change. Also, we didn't have an MMA show, on the same network 1 hour later to compare it to. But I was trying to put out there, and I know this is an episode about Abdullah, but at that point, we're together.
Yes.
I think we were a very good tag team.
Absolutely.
I thought we had a good short-term feud coming off of it. And I just want to get across the point that I'm learning so much from Abdullah. I never take it for granted what any of these great stars want to lend to me, even if in my head I was like, okay, I'm hearing you. I'm going to hold on to that. This is the other side of my brain. I'm going to hold on to that because I don't know when I might never be able to use this, but I might be able to use it. And I'm never going to disregard anything that anybody says to me, but I've also got to have a filter that feels things out and says, this works for me. And you lay it out there and you hope you're right. And you also hope that when you fail, which we all do, that you're in an atmosphere that understands you don't hit titanic home runs without striking out once in a while. So.
Well, that interview you did with the birthday cake is a top 10 favorite of mine for yours, because it's such a great line and it feels like it's out of a movie.
Yeah.
You wrote in your book, we know that you're going to do a series of tags with Abdullah. Sometimes it's 6-mans. Your opponents are usually Sting and maybe Rick Steiner.
So I don't know if Scotty was injured at that time or whether he was in a singles program, but we did a lot of house shows with Sting and Rick Steiner, did the Omni, and to put 6,000 people, maybe the report was a lot less. I believe it was 6,000 with a huge incentive for CNN employees. But I believe it was a good house and a wild melee and a really cool atmosphere. That's what I remember. And one of the nice things about working with Abdullah is you had no pressure to remember spots.
Yeah.
Because there were none.
Because he didn't like to do it that way, and he wouldn't remember it anyway.
He wouldn't remember it, and Rick or Stinger would come up, what do you want to do? I guess we'll just do our best, to follow him. And so you didn't have an elaborate set of spots, but you had a believability and a sense that that something was happening that should not be happening.
Yes.
That this was crossing that line, that elusive line where it becomes very real.
You didn't just fool the fans, you fooled Rick Steiner. There was a moment in a match that you wrote about
in Lakeland, Florida.
Abby's fumbling around. Tell the story.
Abby would go, get off wherever we're going to eat on the road. I don't want to say Abby ever stole silverware.
But Abby stole silverware.
He sold plasticware for sure. And then he would tape up something he got at a fast food restaurant, and he would use it as a gimmick that night. And on that particular night in Lakeland, Abby's fumbling for it. I've got Rick, with not even a tight waist, a loose waist. And Rick all of a sudden does a reversal and suplexes me out of my shoes. And when Sting got on him about it,
onto your head.
It was my first diagnosed concussion. Because
wow.
I had others, but they weren't diagnosed. But this was one where I got to work the next day, and the agents were like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I think so." And they were like, "I think you got your bell rung." And so I didn't miss a match. Yeah, I'm proud of it, but at the same time, it's a different era where you should miss matches. But I'm also in a situation where I can work around the head injury. But Sting got on Rick. He was like, "This guy's been putting me over, making me look great. What are you doing?" And Rick goes, "I thought he was going to try to take something on me." And I remember saying, whether I said to Sting or Rick, I said, I'm not a guy who takes liberties, and if and when I become that guy, I'm not starting with you.
No. No. I mean, in my head, that's a short list in WCW of folks you definitely don't mess with, and near the top of the list, maybe as a tie, Ron Simmons and Rick Steiner.
I want to become a liberty taker. I've never been one, but I'm going to start with Rick Steiner.
No. I mean, unless it's one of those, you hear, your first day in prison, you go after the big guy or something, maybe. But it sounds like a death wish with the Steiner brother. Let's talk about, maybe one of the most notable things you ever did with Abdullah the Butcher, the old Chamber of Horrors.
Oh, nice. Brother, that was an all-star team of heels, right?
And speaking of all-stars, it's heads up with the Atlanta Braves in the World Series. The show is in Chattanooga.
All right.
So you're up against Game 7 of the World Series.
Right.
With the Atlanta Braves, who are just a hop, skip, and a jump from Chattanooga.
Right. 100 miles.
And now you're head-to-head with the first time the Braves have been this good in forever.
Right.
And we're going to go try to put on a pay-per-view. But because there's so many gimmicks and there's so much construction required, the main event kind of goes first.
Right.
And we construct all of this set, and it's a monstrosity. But we're going to electrocute an SOB in the first match, and then in the second match, arm drags, hip tosses, headlock takeovers. But this match is Sting and Elegante and Rick and Scott Steiner against Cactus Jack, Abdullah the Butcher, Big Van Vader, and the Diamond Stud, who we know is going to be Scott Hall and Razor Ramon.
Right.
And the referee
you're talking about all four
everybody's a
Hall
of Famer.
Yep.
Maybe not Elegante, but everybody else in the match.
Right.
Hall of Fame careers, and a referee with a camera helmet.
Nick Patrick had the ref cam.
The referee. Vader's not even supposed to be in the match. He's substituting for Barry Windham. I don't think you're even supposed to be in the match. It's supposed to be Oz. And somehow you're in instead. This is just... We show up to Chattanooga. Lord bless you. What goes through your mind? And you say, self, how are we going to electrocute someone today?
Hey, I was looking forward to it. When people ask me, my feedback on Chamber of Horrors, my answer is almost always the same. Brother, I don't know if I said brother. There's a reason there was no Chamber of Horrors.
Two,
right?
Yes. How about this? As bad as this match is, your night could have been worse. I think you were originally supposed to wrestle Bill Kazmaier.
What? But now that's Oz's territory. Oz Kazmaier is I asked Kevin, are you I hope you don't get upset that anytime I'm going for that seminal stinker, I'm going Oz Kazmaier, and Kevin gets back to me. I think it was by way of text message. Mick, the only way I'd be mad is if you didn't list that match. And I will tell you, we talked last week about Kevin, how he had me laughing so hard my back hurt.
Yes.
I don't even, look, I posted a photo, right?
Yes.
And I said I'm pointing to Kevin's knee brace because it looked like it was pointing to his junk, right? But if people see, because it's just like a mid-thigh down, he's wearing those lime green tights in that photo. So Kevin Nash may or may not be seen on a show I may or may not be part of on A&E wearing the Oz tights.
Oh, my goodness.
Incredible, right? That's an incredible get.
I don't know what to say about that. But we've got an electric chair.
Right.
We've got the referee cam. Right. We've got a collection of enhancement talent. They're going to be ghouls at ringside, one of whom is Brian Clark, who was known as the Night Stalker then. But right. We know he went on to do
There's also
things.
A moment where Sting takes, I believe, a door, and he doesn't hit me with it, but he throws it up in the air. And you can see me watching its flight as it spins in the air, making no attempt whatsoever to cover up my head. And then it comes down on me, and it came up with the heavy stuff, the heavy juice on that one. It felt like something cool was taking place, but at the same time, I remember looking up and seeing that the on switch was already in the off position.
Yes.
Right? So in the same way, like, you know, a few years later, 5 years later, 4 years later, I'm in the King of the Deathmatch stuff, and there's a guy in the mezzanine level detonating the explosives. So it's not actually landing on the boards that detonates the explosives. Similarly, it's not actually the switch that's going to, you know, put the electrocution into process. You thought Alabama had difficulty with their electrocutions? This one, I've got to climb up this structure, pretend I don't see the switch in the off position, pretend I don't see Rick Steiner reversing Abdullah's belly-to-belly attempt.
Into the chair. And now I've got to turn that SOB. And for all its faults, you do believe that Abdullah is cooking when that. I mean, the pyro's there. He's shaking around. And...
I think the commentary is, hey, he's really cooking in there, right? So we are seeing the death of...
We saw a man die to open a pay-per-view.
Now we're going to follow it up with arm drags. It's almost like the Buried Alive match with Undertaker,
at least that went on last.
On pay-per-view. On pay-per-view. A hand comes up, he's alive, a hand comes down. Brother, out come the New Rockers against the Bushwhackers.
Cue the New Rockers.
With no attempt whatsoever made to resuscitate or uncover the Undertaker.
And of course, Abdullah the Butcher, after he dies, stands up and beats everybody up and walks to the back.
They were trying to walk him. They were trying to lead him to the back with the ghouls, right?
Yes.
And then he made his own comeback.
Yes.
Yeah, it was beautiful stuff. And I remember driving back to Atlanta from Chattanooga with Abdullah, and we thought it had been a pretty good match. We didn't see what the people saw.
When you get to the back, did you feel like that you had pulled it off? I mean, obviously you knew, boy, we had to have some help with production, but maybe it worked. I mean, if you're trying to be an optimist.
Maybe it worked. If I was just looking at Abdullah cooking, how well that went, him turning on the ghouls, I'd have to, maybe that's something for a watch along sometime. Maybe that would be fun to revisit and watch along.
Let's talk about...
you know how sometimes the sum is greater, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts?
Yes.
This is the one where the whole was much weaker than the sum of its parts. Like some of the parts were good.
Yes.
But as a whole.
Not so good.
Not so good.
Over the 91 Christmas holiday week, you and Abdullah the Butcher defeat the team of Elegante and Van Hammer every night at the house shows.
You want to hear my promo?
Yes.
This is as Cactus Jack. Cactus Jack and Abdullah might make Van Hammer a horrible sight in Atlanta at the Omni all on Christmas night. Bang, bang! That was just
You were doing Santa in 91. Look
91,
at you.
91, brother. And that was where I saw Abdullah, where he's like, how do you have a match with Hammer and El Elefante? A house show match without the blood and guts, right? And Abdullah would do this thing almost like, chicken wings. Like he would get ready. It was fun to watch. He could be a lot of fun to watch. It just, I tried to be fun to watch too, and then have that other gear where maybe I could scare some people. Those were fun matches. Probably not good, but fun.
Then at Starrcade on December 29th, from the Scope in Norfolk, Abdullah is paired with Sting in the Lethal Lottery. It's going to be Sting and Abdullah the Butcher taking on Brian Pillman and Bobby Eaton. Of course, you're going to interfere and accidentally hit Abdullah with his own kendo stick. I just love this because Abdullah starts fighting with you because of the miscommunication. Yeah. Security's trying to break the two of you up. And you guys just keep brawling into the crowd, into the backstage. Are you just having the time of your life working with your real-life traveling partner here?
Loved it.
Yeah.
Loved it. And specifically remember as a high water moment, working at Virginia, at the UVA, University of Virginia. And as Abdullah and I brawl to the back, we see that the men's basketball team has just arrived. It doesn't matter that there are no cameras on. We went for an extra 3 to 5 minutes in front of a stunned UVA.
Just to sell it.
It's the men's. They're one of the best basketball teams in the country.
Yes.
We couldn't just stop and, hey, thanks, man. Like, you just kept working.
Yeah.
If there was an audience there, that was some fun stuff. And this was at a time when I thought I was immortal, I thought I could do anything.
Right.
So I would be flying around as if the camera was on me, but to an audience of 15 back there.
This miscommunication and brawling at Starrcade, that's not the official breakup of your team. You keep teaming up through January 92. On an additional worldwide, Eric Bischoff conducts a backstage interview with you guys talking about your problems. And you say that you're two emotional people and oftentimes emotions lead to violence. And Abdullah's in the background eating a block of wood. A block of wood, Mick. You guys are just having a blast here. Like, what crazy shit can we do on TV next?
The mistakes WCW made over the years are pretty well documented.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm including TNA in this as well. Is that I think there's a tendency to write off everything because some of it wasn't great, but within those episodes, there were just great moments, not just for me and Abdullah, but there were so many great moments. And then you get frustrated by things that you thought should have been done differently that weren't. But you collect those great moments. Abdullah eating the block of wood, I had no recall of that. And even we're two emotional people.
Great stuff.
It's good stuff.
You versus Van Hammer at Clash 18 on January 21st has Abby involved.
Topeka, Kansas.
Falls Count Anywhere. You can take it all over the country. And that's the way it's explained to you. And you say, I must admit, I doubted his sincerity, but I'll be damned if we didn't get to Topeka and things hadn't been reconsidered. In early 92, our fight in the rodeo arena outside of the Topeka Coliseum was considered unique. We fought all over the arena and I even debuted one of the dumbest moves of my career.
The sunset flip?
Off the second turnbuckle
Without
to the concrete floor. Holy shit, screamed referee Nick Patrick, who was a second-generation wrestler, had seen just about everything. I've never seen anything like that. We wound up fighting all over the building. We spilled across the parking lot to the rodeo arena that actually had bulls that were brought in to add to the spectacle. And out of nowhere, a 400-pound black cowboy appeared and attempted to hit me with a scoop shovel. I instead maneuvered Hammer into the shovel's path, and the shovel made a nice bonk off the back of his head and neck. I punched the cowboy, knocking off his hat, and I'll be damned if the 400-pound black cowboy didn't turn out to be Abdullah. I covered Hammer and gained the pinfall right next to a pile of dried-up horse manure. Abdullah the Butcher had so many iconic moments with you, but it's been so long, I think, because you've accomplished so much since, I think we kind of forget.
And I want to be said, I loved working with Van Hammer.
Yes.
I really looked forward to it.
You guys got a bonus for that match,
We got a bonus.
right?
We got the best match bonus, which I think was an extra $5,000 each. And then we split it up. Maybe equally between me, Hammer, Nick, and Abdullah.
My favorite part of this, you wrote about in your book. But the battle wasn't over yet. Abby and I continued the assault into the rodeo arena where Missy was on special hazard duty as the on-scene reporter. Earlier in the day, Dusty had pulled me and Abby aside and whispered, Can I do my Dusty? Oh, God, please.
I didn't say this, but I'd like to see the girl end up in the water. The horse trough, right?
Yes, you're going to put Missy Hyatt in the horse trough, and wouldn't you know it, in the freakiest of freak accidents, Missy Hyatt ended up taking an 18-degree bath in a horse trough. And the next day, Kip Fry, who had earlier in the week replaced Jim Hurd as president of WCW, awarded Hammer and me a $5,000 bonus.
We should have thrown a bonus to Missy. Missy, if you're listening, you know I love you, right?
She took the bump, yeah.
Missy, I love Missy.
So now you and Abby are seemingly split up, and this leads to several cage matches on the road, including February 2nd in Philly and February 9th at the Omni. Meltzer would say, Abdullah beat Cactus Jack in the bloodiest cage match seen in years. Cactus was said to have gotten a 4.5-inch gash on his forehead at the hairline, and Abdullah attacked and bled all over Bill Apter. That's from the Philly match. Do you remember a 4.5-inch gash, or is that just...
No, I don't. But I do remember having some good color at both those events.
Super Brawl 2, Cactus Jack is going to find himself being pinned by Ron Simmons. But somewhere after the match, Abdullah the Butcher does a run-in to attack Jack. But lo and behold, he attacks Simmons instead, and they double on Simmons until JYD comes out, headbutts a few security guards, and makes the save. So even though Abby's making the save for you here, you wrestle each other on the house shows in March, and then Abby goes back to Japan for a month. Does any of this make sense where we're friends, we're not, or is it just crazy because your characters are
we loved
crazy?
it. I mean, I think, yeah, we, friends and enemies, it seemed to make sense. And it was a wonderful pairing up until, Abdullah, he was asked to put over Dustin in the Omni. And,
on June 7th.
June 7th, my birthday. So that's cool to know. We were together for almost a year. We were together for about 11 months on TV, rode for most of that time together. Laid face down with 27 guns aimed at us in North Carolina. Yeah, we were stopped and told we looked exactly like two bank robbers. And I remember going, we look exactly like two. And I'm, champ, stay under control. We were driving along, and we had Brian Knighton, Axel Rotten in the back seat. And we start seeing one police car after another, and there's about 4 ahead of us, and there's 4 behind us, and now we got them. Those lights come on, no messing around. We're on our stomachs, hands behind our heads, guns of all sorts trained at us, and we were told that Abdullah and I met the description of the bank robbers. So there was another 420-pound black man with grooves so deep he could put his poker chips in them, and another 307-pound guy with shoulder-length hair. We were out there robbing
I love
banks.
that you were so excited. We look like bank robbers. We're real heels, damn it.
I was upset about it. I was upset because that's a traumatic thing, right? To have that many guns on you, like
for sure.
It was a scary moment. But I remember snapping and being like, that just sounded ludicrous. And Abdullah trying to appeal to my, senses. Champ, take it easy there. Yeah, that was a pretty ominous situation to be in.
It's just a shame WCW cameras weren't there to capture it. Do you remember being at the Omni the night he quit?
Yeah, I do.
Does he come say goodbye? Is he frustrated, or is it just one of those?
It was just one of those things. Like he felt like they wanted him to leave, so they, did a reverse making of the offer he couldn't refuse. They knew he wouldn't do it, and that was Abdullah's feeling. No hard feelings, champ. Love you. And I remember champ, we will always be together. That's what he said. And while it didn't seem to make sense, again, I think that was WCW's way of, of taking Abby off the roster.
You would leave WCW in 94, and we could only find where you guys had one more match against each other. You went to a no contest and a no DQ match on September 24th in Georgia for Peach State Wrestling.
Yeah.
425 fans there. Do you think that's your last match against Abby?
I think so, yeah. Wild brawl all over that gymnasium.
Your last match in WCW, you wrote about this in your book. I entered the ring for the night's final match to a smattering of applause and one guy yelling, "You suck, Cactus Jack." I was sporting a piece of white athletic tape on my head, which was covering a small wound I suffered 2 days earlier in a match with my old partner, Abdullah The Butcher. He had accidentally punctured my forehead with one of his foreign objects, and as a result, I had a small but deep hole in my forehead. That's not a sentence that you hear a lot of times. He accidentally stabbed a small and deep hole in my forehead. You never write that you considered it, but did you consider working with Abdullah the Butcher dangerous?
My wife was concerned because of the HIV and the free flow of blood. She was worried about that.
Just to add context, the Magic Johnson thing really took over in 1991.
Abdullah the Butcher and I were in Los Angeles because we were working the same venue that the Lakers played at, which was the Forum. We were taking a walk on the beach when I got the news about Magic Johnson, who had just given that interview at the Forum, and it was really at that time HIV was thought to be a death sentence.
Yes.
Nobody thought nobody would have thought
he'd still be here now.
Yeah, 32 years later, he's around, he's in great health. That was a devastating blow to the entire sports world. I mean, the world at large. He was such a beloved figure. But I always remember we were right there in Los Angeles at the Forum, several hours, and I got the news when I was on the beach, walking on the beach with Abdullah. And it was a concern, but at the same time, you had those blinders on, to where I'm hearing what all the veterans are telling me about the elbow drop and how I'm going to need, a hip replacement, one of the great legends tell me I'd be in a wheelchair by the time I was 30, not 40, 30. And so you're hearing it, but you're also dead set on accomplishing what you wanted to accomplish. I did take it seriously because it was such a concern of my wife's, but I don't think it stopped me from, doing the type of matches that I thought I should have.
We'd be remiss if we didn't talk about that once upon a time there was a controversy associated with a blood disease and Abdullah the Butcher. But I'm curious if even that changed your opinion about blood and wrestling.
Have to think of what year was that?
I would say it's been in the mid-2000s.
Yeah.
So if we want to call it 07, 08.
Yeah, by then I was done wrestling.
You can still have an opinion about
wrestling. I don't know all the facts. Whether Abdullah knew that he had.
Just the idea that I'm not saying we should say whether or not Abdullah did or didn't, or I don't know any of those details. I just mean in terms of it's one thing when you hear, hey, a basketball player had this circumstance. Yeah. It's another thing when it's, hey, this is a guy I used to ride in the car with, and he wrestled a similar style, and we did a lot of the same similar things. And if timing was different, man, that might have been me.
Could have been me, yeah.
Right.
Could have been me.
So I'm not here to, throw stones at Abdullah. I'm just saying, just like we've all sort of said, man, we know much more about head trauma. Maybe we should rethink our approach. Does any of that change the way you feel about blood in wrestling?
Well, I always felt like it had a place, and I've been around when it was overused, and I've been around where it was underused or extinct. I was pretty good with the amount of blood when I was in WWE because of all the big matches, up until I had my comeback matches where the blood was more frequent. I think I was only in 4 or 5 bloody matches.
Right.
In my 4 years in WWE.
Less is more.
Less is more. So that when Steve and Bret had their legendary match, it really meant something because it wasn't overdone. I talked about in my Have a Nice Day book about the agreement I had with the promoter, Joel Goodhart, that I would do the barbed wire match with Eddie Gilbert, but only if I was the first person to bleed on that card, and I wanted his assurance that there wouldn't be a overusage of it. And little did I know there was a last blood battle royal
where literally everyone
19 guys are bleeding, and then you go out there and try to make it meaningful in your match. So I'm sure there were times when I was involved in bloody matches that didn't need to be bloody.
Right.
I was in some others that could have, where the blood would have taken a good match and made it great, or taken a great match and made it legendary. But, I did pretty well for myself in WWE during my main 4 years there, where I rarely bled. And I did pretty well in WCW even after they put the Ixnay on the bleeding. So I didn't feel like I had to have it.
Right.
I thought I had it in perspective. Maybe I used it a little more often than I should have, but I also don't think I overused it, or else my fair complexion would look considerably different.
I'm curious, when you look back at all the violence of some of these characters, whether it was the Sheik or Abdullah or yourself, and then you see how, boy, deathmatch wrestling, they've really turned it up several notches. Mm-hmm. Razor wire, razor boards, the big skewers, light tubes, lots of stuff that you guys never really ventured into. I'm sure, just like with the evolution of wrestling, I hear that back in the day, people would say, oh, Flair and Steamboat, they're going too fast. They're doing too many high spots.
Yeah.
And now these days, those same guys are saying, boy, the kids these days are just going too fast. And so it evolves. But where do you stand on more modern deathmatch wrestling?
I haven't watched that much of it. I was on hand for Moxley and Nick Gage. And in the interest of full disclosure, I did get a Nick Gage cameo video from my kids.
MBK all freaking day.
2021. And made sure Nick knew, all right, while I choose not to curse very often.
He should.
You should. So Nick ran off more F-bombs in a 2-minute video than the kids have heard their dad use in 20 years.
Yes.
That's shoot, Huey says, my youngest said, outside of my shows where I drop the 1 F-bomb a night, he's only heard me use it 3 times, and he's almost 20 years old. So I do believe in the same way the F-bombs are used occasionally as a strong action verb in the Foley bedroom, that makes it more magical, that we have to, the same thing when it comes to blood, you want to make it impactful. But going back to deathmatch wrestling, I don't like light tubes because they don't rate high on the Foley instantaneous risk-reward ratio analysis, because to me, there is a potential for fans to get injured, and I don't like that. I don't like it.
It's unpredictable.
It's unpredictable, and I saw what it did to Undertaker as far as when we used light tubes in 1996 in the Boiler Room Brawl. That it got in and gave him a horrible infection. Conceivably, if he didn't have better medical attention, it could have really been a bad mark on his career or the end of his career. So I think, Nick Gage had to be resuscitated. He bled out. He had to be brought back from the dead. So I think everybody has to watch out. I do believe these are consenting adults. It's not something that kids should be doing or emulating.
It does feel like that's calmed down a lot, though. It feels like the crazy backyard wrestling stuff where kids were doing this in their backyard, it feels like that has sort of phased out. It does. And now when kids are doing stuff, I think by and large, people are, they see that it's enough fun to do without those things. And that some of the things that got the biggest pops when I was doing the wild matches are the easiest and least likely to lead to real injuries.
I mean, I took an issue when my own home paper tore me apart for the violence I used, including salad tongues to the genitalia. And I remember calling up the editor and saying, can you point to one incident in real life where someone has been injured with salad tongues? You want to point that out to me? Is I'm not aware that that's happened. And yet you could get a monster pop, one that would just last for, you're talking about a 15, 20-second pop, depending on which member of the nation was willing to run in place and sell it. But it would be monstrous to where, if you got a good heel like The Rock who would run in place and circle around the ring, you're giving every person a great view. At the goings-on, nobody's getting hurt. And I think, incorporating some of the fun stuff, like cheese grater. Has there ever been an instrument of destruction easier to feign than a cheese grater? And if you're really applying pressure and really dicing someone's head, you're doing something wrong.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's also worth mentioning, and again, I don't know, I'm just guessing, you probably made more money with a sock puppet than any other weapon. So it's not necessary, but, as you said, it's consenting adults. And if that's what they want to do, and there's clearly a market for it, but it's
there was.
A niche
when I went to
market.
Japan, I was part of a very small promotion. And there was a subculture that liked those matches.
Yes.
Now, on any given night, you'd see good technical wrestling. You'd see a lucha match, but it was almost always capped off by something wild. And that's what I enjoyed about the show I went to with Moxley and Nick, is that no one did a death match other than that finale. That there was some great stuff. I got to see Marco Stunt do his thing. I got to see Thunder Rosa, the first house show I'd ever seen Thunder Rosa at. Like, they were tearing the house down with the other stuff. And now it's really a perfect time to, now you do have to follow through what you promised, which is a wild and violent match, and those guys did.
Let's talk about Abdullah the Butcher. What you sort of alluded to it earlier. We didn't have a falling out. We just lost touch. And you even sort of insinuated that when he left the Omni, it was just your riding partner of all these months is just gone.
I would have thought I would catch up with Abdullah more over the years than I did.
Yeah.
But he was kind of coming to that tail end of his full-time working. I did run across him a few other times over the years, but not much. I wish I had. I did go with Dennis Brent to Abdullah the Butcher's house of ribs and Chinese food, but I don't know if I've seen him more than 5 times since that last time we said goodbye at the Omni.
Isn't that weird? And maybe it shouldn't be, because we fans who are listening to this, myself included, we sort of romanticize wrestling a little more than just a traditional job. But when I hear stories like what you just said, I sort of remind myself that it is, boy, I hate the way this sounds, but it is just a job. And so a lot of us have like work friends who we're tight with. We spend at least 40 hours a week with.
Yeah.
We're laughing, we're joking. And maybe we work together 5, 10 years, and then somebody moves, somebody gets another job, and you don't mean to, but you just sort of fall out of touch with those folks. It's not like you had a falling out, but they were kind of your work friends.
Well, I want to assure people that the genuine feelings of warmth and affection for so many of these people. But I remember Rick Rude saying when we caught up in WWE before Rick left for WCW over the Owen Hart Montreal, over the Bret Hart Montreal screw job.
Yeah.
And he was like, he always called me Cackles. And it was like, it's been 2 years, you just pick up where you left off. So I just assumed that Abby was a guy I would see regularly from that point on. And this is the day in the age before texting, before social media, and it became much easier. It's just taking, we did an episode on China.
Yes.
There was, rumor that Joni had made an attempt on her life, and it becomes much easier and more comfortable to reach out and let someone know you're thinking about them via text messages. And, the stuff I've done as Santa for my colleagues is done largely through, text messages, or back when I was on Twitter, through direct messages, sometimes with people I never worked with, some of the people I never work. I never had a chance to work with Becky. You
Right.
know, and people, the females, and they have children. One of the relationships I love the most is Lacey Evans, because I don't know her that well beyond being Santa
Yes.
to her children. But she knows she's going to get a message from me like every middle of November, and I think that's something that, she really looks forward to.
Absolutely.
So I would say, not to plug the upcoming show on A&E. Hypothetically, if I am hosting a show,
and you might be.
One of the most fun parts for me is connecting with the guys. And all of these are real friendships, whether I have seen these guys or men or women in the last 10 years. You just pick up where you left off, and you genuinely like these people and appreciate what they brought into your life. But there is a little sense of sadness that it's not always more than that.
Right.
So part of the reason that we talked about in the last episode is that the stuff I've done with Rock in the last 3 years as Santa for his children has really solidified what was already it's taken what was already a great friendship and teaming and made it something even more special,
deeper,
so that I had no idea back in the days when I wondered if Rock appreciated me, that I'd be in my hotel room fighting back tears as I see my depiction on the Young Rock show.
It's amazing.
So I think they are real, and there's something to be said. There's something to be said for entering someone's life for a relatively short time and having an impact, and hopefully creating not only memories for the fans, but moments that those people will not forget. And I'd like to think, and I think we've even talked about on the show, like, I'd like to think that my lasting impression is that I was good to people around me.
You were.
That hopefully is what people remember. What did you think of Mick Foley as a wrestler? I got to be honest, I don't think his stuff holds up. I don't think his stuff holds up over time. What do you think about him as a person? Oh, he was nice to everybody. That's far more important to me than where I stand on the depth chart of greatest WWE superstars of all time.
Well, we're finishing up talking about Abdullah the Butcher. What do you think his legacy will be in wrestling?
He made everyone money.
Yes.
Everyone. He did the thing with the blood disease. I don't know much about it. That's a sad chapter.
Yeah, we hope he's okay.
In that book, but it's not the only chapter.
That's right.
And he's a guy that brought out the best in a lot of people, made a lot of people and company monies, and brother, some of the best ribs you'll ever taste.
We got a ton of fun questions. Let's hit a few here as we wind this one up. Umar wants to know, should Abdullah come to the WWF in '98 for a short program with Mankind?
I would have loved it. I talked about this goes back to, I would have loved to have seen him get that moment at the Rumble, but it would have been a fun program to work with Mankind.
Sega Genesis says, what do wrestlers do to not have Abdullah forehead scars? I think I've heard Flair mention Neosporin in his book, but I don't think that could have helped in this case.
Well, I don't want to get into the logistics, but in order to essentially, Abdullah got color in front of everybody.
Yes.
And you never saw it because he was so lightning quick and it looked like a natural motion. Man, I hate talking shop like this.
We don't have to.
The problem with going along with your natural wrinkles, frown lines, is that old school is people see the elbow out here.
Yes.
And that's a giveaway. Back when it was important in drawing money that be secretive. And it's much more natural, but much more long lasting if you're going down.
Yeah, and Abdullah would do that.
Yeah.
Fast.
Repeatedly.
Fast.
So that he might have 20 lacerations that you never even saw coming.
From one match.
All the time I worked with Terry Funk, I never once saw him do it because he was so lightning quick.
Yes.
And that's like, I looked at, for example, when I saw the movie with Mickey Rourke, I love the movie, but even you can love something and find fault with it. And I thought, hold on a second, Mickey Rourke, this character would have been super hot in the early 80s. He would have been a baby face who did the territories. He had the bleach blonde hair. The blood would have looked great on him. He probably would have done it hundreds of times. You can't tell me that he would take a bump, slowly open up his tape, then maneuver his gimmick. Yes. He would have been, boom, he would have had it before he even knew he had it.
Yes.
But then that doesn't make for good cinema. Even though I think it could have been shot in a way that could have showed the art of getting juice.
Is there a more obvious one than that famous Captain Lou Albano one?
Where Lou's getting hit in the back. He's going
right in front of the camera. Just right in front of the camera.
Well, in Japan, it was considered a badge of honor for the media to see you do it. So
to prove that you were committed.
To prove that you were committed. So it was always a struggle. Some of the time you knew going out there, especially when you didn't have a chance to talk to your opponent ahead of time. You're in different parts of the building. But I would try to just get them to understand that if we're doing a barbed wire match, blood should come from the barbed wire.
Yes.
If you're doing the then it should come from the tacks. That it shouldn't come from a ring post. That you don't graduate from a ring post where you've already gotten your color. There's really not much of a threat to the barbed wire, which is there to break your skin if you've already done that. So There were times when you knew you weren't creating art, you're just trying to get through it and give people a decent show. Like, you got to keep your expectations fairly muted in those situations.
Jamie wants to know, how do you think Abdullah would fare in modern wrestling? Was his style a little too raw for today's wrestling world?
Well, it depends on how many changes would be made to accommodate the different era. If he was made to work like everyone else, he wouldn't get over. If they understood, if whatever promotion was using him, understood they had a unique attraction, I'd like to think that there's still a spot for a guy who can come in and get that instant heat. I think there is.
Scott wants to know, what's the most athletic thing you ever saw Abdullah do?
Well, Abdullah would take monkey flips on a nightly basis. And I remember when I did, I wore a neoprene brace, not a brace, a wrap around my ribs for several months in WCW, because I'd cracked my ribs working with Jumbo Tsuruta in Japan. So I even went from wearing a flak jacket, because, cracked ribs are broken ribs, and they're hard to heal when you're doing the type of stuff that I was. And so at the time, we didn't realize the science was that the neoprene is going to squeeze you and not allow you to take deep breaths, which creates this danger of pneumonia.
Yes.
Because it's kind of fragile science to say we're going to squeeze it so that those ribs push together and heal. Like, I don't know if there was any more healing that went on because of that stupid neoprene wrap that I used for 4 or 5 months. But anyway, when I was working with Abdullah, I remember trying to give him the monkey flip, and my ribs, the pain altered the trajectory, and it was a big botch. And we got the laughter, which you didn't want when you're doing a blood feud. And then we got him back. But that was probably the most athletic thing. He would take a monkey flip, and a good monkey flip, on most of the house shows.
What a sight, too, for a man. Yeah,
it was a heck of a thing.
Next week, we're going to be talking about a Loser Leaves Town match, Cactus Jack returning, Dennis Knight being a Mankind impersonator, and maybe my favorite match you ever had, your incredible match at Madison Square Garden against Triple H. It's Royal Rumble season. We're talking Royal Rumble 2000
talking
next
Mr.
week.
January.
Mr. January. And by the way, you can celebrate Mr. January right now at FoleyIsPodShirts.com. We've got a ton of new swag and merch over there. We got tumblers, posters, a new fanny pack with the Hardcore Legend on the front. And yes, there's even an extender, so all the big boys can rock it too. Maybe my favorite shirt, the King of the Deathmatch tee, the classic Commissioner tee, close for second. Mr. In Your House, and of course, who could forget Mr. January? And it is January, so just like we did last week, let's celebrate with another clip here. Yeah, that's right. Mr. January, available now at foleyisPodshirts.com.
Conrad, if I may, January, one of the weakest months of the year on Cameo.
Yep.
And if you go and you look at, you go to cameo.com/Mick Foley and you see that highly responsive, which I get the printout, not the printout, the analytics says average time, 24 hours.
Wow.
My time, 2 hours.
2 hours?
That's the average. That's the average turnaround time. And so I'm really proud of the fact that I return that stuff quick and with care and quality. And so if you are somebody is celebrating a birthday, or if you want to get in early on Valentine's Day, I'll get those things back to you in a hurry.
Let me recommend this too. If you're like me and you're listening to this, you probably watch the Royal Rumble with a bunch of your wrestling friends. Wouldn't it be cool if before you started the pay-per-view, you had a cameo calling out all your buddies from, I don't know, maybe more than one Face of Foley on the 25th anniversary? Come on now.
Oh, wow. Could you imagine that? It's perfect for a Royal Rumble party.
It is.
Perfect.
What's that address again?
It is cameo.com/Mick Foley, where I keep it real. Real Mick Foley on Instagram, Facebook, and the Twitter account that I pulled, but we may bring back again for Foley Is Pod.
I appreciate that.
We may do that. Those are real. I keep it real. But on Cameo, it's cameo.com/Mick Foley, and I will create something that I think will exceed your expectations.
Just in time for the Royal Rumble. And again, that's definitely not an ad. It's just a public service announcement.
Yes.
Because if you're going to be watching the Rumble with your buddies, who better than to surprise them? Who better to do a run-in than not one, not two, but maybe all three faces?
I can do it. Yeah, I can do it. Yeah.
Cameo.com/Mick Foley. We'll be back next week talking more Royal Rumble as we get in our Wayback Machine to 2000. I can't wait to talk about that match with you and Triple H.
It's going to be great.
Right here on Foley Is Pod.